Hello, this is Billy Peterson, Wealth Services Point of View. Most of you have heard a lot, or maybe just a little, about the recent legislation and what has been termed the Big Beautiful Bill. Now, that at one time was just a catchy punchline that Trump threw out to try to get members of Congress and the media rattle a little bit about what he thinks of passing this legislation in one fell swoop without going back multiple times for corrections or additions of what different members of Congress wanted to include or didn't want to include. There were a few holdouts on the Republican side, but in the end, they had enough votes to get it passed, and Trump just signed it into law. So I wanted to take a minute and tell you all a little bit about what to expect, what is in there that many of us don't know, and talk about some of the misinformation that's going on both sides of the aisle, so we can come to a logical and sensible conclusion with it. So it is a little over 1,000 pages, and it does primarily extend the tax cuts that Trump introduced in 2017. So those are going to continue. Also, he was able to add or get past the promise of no tax on tips and overtime pay, and also deductions for certain people on auto loan interest. And another important component that many people are going to enjoy, especially on the senior citizen level, is the $6,000 deduction to Social Security income. So let's talk a little bit about some of these tax cuts. The main thing is, again, the continuation of what happened in 2017. And then most people across the board are going to see tax rate cuts between 2 and 4% with everything included. Those tax cuts that we originally passed in 2017 were set to expire at the end of this year. So Trump's pretty proud of himself for getting this extended, and his agenda has been largely successful in what he wanted to do. The tax cuts that you're going to see have some pros and cons, obviously, for everyone. So I want to try to dive into that and tell you a little bit more about it. Standard deductions are going to increase to $15,750 for single filers, and then $31,500 for married couples who file jointly. And then the estate and gift tax exemption rises to $15 million for individuals, and then $30 million for couples. That's a big jump from where it was. So many people are going to find themselves unaffected by the estate tax at death, which many people I know worry about it, and a lot of estate attorneys and accountants help high net worth people plan for. The child tax credit also jumps to $2,200 per child starting this year, up from $1,700. Actually, of the $2,200, $1,700 of that is refundable, which means that even if people didn't owe any tax or owed less than $1,700, they're going to get that full amount back in a check from the IRS. Imagine that, the IRS owing you money. Now, don't hold your breath, because I've never found the IRS to be very forthcoming with sending you money when they owe you. But if, boy, don't owe them anything, or you're going to have penalties that you can't imagine. The government's also going to have this new provision that is, I find interesting, called Trump accounts. And this is for kids or children born between 2025 and 2028. So over the next 4 years, children are going to be receiving a one-time $1,000 deposit for every child who is a U.S. citizen. That deposit's going to be invested in a broad-based U.S. stock benchmark. So that's going to be an interesting kind of a first time that the government's going to take money, allocate it to individuals, and then invest that in some sort of a market index, which I've been advocating for many years for them to do something similar with Social Security, and we wouldn't be in this dire situation with Social Security running out in the next 10 or 15 years. But that's another point. Parents are going to be able to also contribute to this Trump account for their children, and they can contribute up to $5,000 annually, and the investments are going to grow tax deferred in this fund that's going to, again, track a U.S. broad-based index. Employers can also chip in, and they can add $2,500 per account per eligible child. So that money can grow if it's left alone for a number of years and contributions are made. Could be a substantial account, and it could come out taxed as long-term capital gains if the money is redeemed for qualified purposes, which I would imagine we'll learn more about that in coming weeks or months. Something like education or health or maintenance of support, something that they deem important for the child's career or advancement. Families with children under 17 are going to see some additional help as well with the child tax credit I mentioned, going from 20 or 2,000 up to 2,200. And then you're also going to see some additional assistance with the tax on tips program, that individuals who are receiving some tip income can deduct up to $25,000 of that income annually from federal taxes between 2025 and 2028. So that's not going to be perpetual, but it is going to help for these next 4 years. Those deductions, however, will phase out for individuals who earn more than $150,000 or $300,000 for joint filers. And then also those people who are working overtime or long hours are going to receive some temporary tax deduction on that overtime pay in the form of single filers receiving a deduction of $12,500 and joint filers receiving a deduction of $25,000. This deduction will phase out for these high earners, and then it expires completely after 2028. Then for car buyers, the taxpayers who are under a certain threshold on income will be able to deduct up to $10,000 on interest for a new auto loan. And of course, that's going to be over the next 4 years as well, expires in 2028. The deduction phases out for individuals earning over $100,000 or for married filing jointly over $200,000. Of course, Trump's big agenda about America First requires that these vehicles that are going to be purchased for this benefit must be assembled in the United States. So that's one thing to be aware of if you are thinking about a new car and have to take out a loan to pay for it. Taxpayers also going to benefit from increase in the SALT deductions, state and local tax deductions. Originally, that SALT deduction was capped at $10,000, and now it's going to be increased to $40,000 starting this year. And then it's going to increase by 1% per year through 2029 before reverting back to $10,000 in 2030. This expanded deduction will start phasing out for taxpayers over $500,000 who file jointly. The seniors, as I mentioned, are largely going to avoid taxes on their Social Security, which is a nice plus. That's pretty sad that we put our money into a program that the government is supposed to take care of for our later years, and the government has pretty much already blown that up for us. You know me, I'm not a big fan of the government touching a lot of things because they find a way to ruin most of it. But we're going to get this $6,000 deduction for Social Security income for the vast majority of senior citizens. It's estimated that nearly 90% of senior citizens who are receiving Social Security income will pay no tax under this change. And that could be helpful. It's going to avoid payment of about $30 billion a year from individuals. Rather than paying the government back on that income for taxation, they'll keep that in their own pockets. Students are going to have some, essentially, let's call them requirements in order to be eligible for loans for higher education. On the plus side, the Pell Grants are going to be expanded to cover short-term workforce-focused programs similar to trade schools, broadening access for students who would like to get a more focused education. Think electricians, plumbers, things like that, the trade tech schools. And they're pursuing a degree or a certification in a non-traditional format. So the Pell Grants are going to be expanded to cover those types of careers or those types of education paths. Graduate students are going to be restricted, however, in the traditional sense, up to $20,500 per year is the max borrowing, and a lifetime maximum of $100,000 for these unsubsidized loans. And then professional degrees, so the doctorates or the MBAs, things like that for law and medicine, they're going to be capped at $50,000 a year and $200,000 over a lifetime. This Parent Plus program is going to be limited to $20,000 per year per child and a lifetime max of $65,000. And then these Graduate Plus loans, which would allow graduate students to borrow at the full cost of attendance, are going to be eliminated altogether. The thought there was too many students were taking out obscene student loan debt and then never finding a way to repay it or never getting their full money's worth. They were never doing what they thought they would do with that degree. And, most of these universities and college degrees are getting in the stratosphere as far as the expenses go. And that's just a way to rein in what the government is on the hook for if the students never pay it back. New borrowers are also going to have only 2 repayment options starting in 2026. They're either going to have a standard fixed payment or they're going to be on an income-driven repayment plan that'll be a percentage of their income. So students can't just defer their hardship provision or defer repayment perpetually. They're going to have to stick to that plan and get that loan paid off. Now, one of the big buzzes out there, and a lot of people are up in arms about the bill, is related to Medicaid and how many people are going to lose benefits. The media, a lot of the media outlets are broadcasting that $1 trillion is going to be cut from Medicaid, which is technically true, but that's going to be over a decade. And it's not going to be just like off a cliff cuts. It's just slowing down the rate of growth, the amount of money that the government allocates to Medicaid. So in part, there's going to be some people who lose benefits. Yes. And I've done some research on this. I'm not just going to take what the media says and run with it. I'm doing research on multiple fronts from different sources. And I'm seeing that around 4.8 million able-bodied adults are potentially going to be required to get back into the community and get engaged in some sort of a work-related, participating, build the economy, help build their community, do something in their community to be eligible for Medicaid. It's not highly restrictive or overly burdensome. We're talking 80 hours a month. And I know that really, really gripes a lot of people that they're going to have to go back and participate and get involved and be involved in some sort of a work program or be involved in having a job. But it kind of, again, helps the economy by having more people contributing and less people sitting there waiting for their check to come in, so to speak. In addition to those 4.8 million able-bodied adults, there are about 1.4 million people who are going to see their benefits terminate because they are not U.S. citizens. Now, under prior administrations, that was essentially not even a concern. So 1.4 million people illegally in the United States were receiving Medicaid, again, on the U.S. taxpayer's dime without any citizenship or any contribution to the program. So that's going to be taken away. And then lastly, there's about 2.2 million people who may become uninsured just because of other provisions or lack of motivation to seek that employment program or be involved in what is going to be required of them going forward. So some of these things are going to increase. Some people are just going to become less enamored to apply and may just back out altogether. So those things are something that we need to pay attention to. There's a lot of misinformation, I think, going back and forth, both sides. Some people saying there's no cuts at all. Some people saying everyone's going to lose coverage. I think that's, somewhere more middle slanted, but don't listen and believe everything you hear. Again, the largest cuts are going to come from these folks who are considered eligible, but have to prove and have to participate in the economy in order to continue to receive that. Also, there's about $50 billion allocated to rural hospitals that could be affected by these cuts so they don't want to unduly harm these small rural hospitals that are essential to small towns. The people on food stamps, call this Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, you'll hear. There's going to be a lot of changes there where the states are now going to be required to participate at a much higher degree than they were before. Currently, they're required to kick in about 50% of the administrative costs, and now that's going up to 75%. And once again, work requirements will be implemented for adults age 55 to 64, and then parents with children 14 and older. So 5.3 million households could see their benefits drop by $25 a month. And then maybe lastly, the Small Business Administration program for small business owners, I should say, contractors or those self-employed sole proprietors, are going to see the continuation of the small business deduction, whereby they can receive up to 20% deduction for their operating income. Obviously, there's qualifications and there's phase outs, just like everything else, but the qualified business income could see a nice deduction. So that's a benefit and an incentive for people to start a business. And that's going to continue for all Americans who are eligible under that business income deduction plan. So I hope this helped you wrap up some of the information about the bill that was just passed into law. We'll see how this transpires. I know there's a lot of uncertainty and ups and downs in the market, and people looking at what's the next round of news coming out. Will we have more tariffs? We're going back to higher tariffs, or are we going to have deals put in place? Trump likes to present a positive spin on everything that he's projecting and everything that he's trying to get done. Obviously, he's a tough guy to negotiate with. He's really demanding. He has a high ego. Some of the things he does, he does it just as a negotiating tactic. So he says things that I've tended to kind of shrug off as, that's never going to happen. But he has shown that he's business and he's serious and he's not going to mess around. And I think he has to do that in order to get people to take him seriously and not just call his bluff, because he's the type of guy that you don't want to play games with. So all in all, I think the economy is moving along a lot better than people expected with the tariff issue, and a lot of people expecting us to drop off a cliff as far as a recession. That hasn't happened. I do think the Federal Reserve needs to act and give us some rate cuts for relief on primarily the folks that are looking to buy homes. It's sad to see the younger generation in their 20s and 30s really struggling to make ends meet and to be able to afford housing. And I think that will correct itself largely with some interest relief in the form of tax deductions by the Federal Reserve. I don't see any reason why they can't do that now. Sometimes, unfortunately, I do believe that our federal agencies, and that's not even technically an agency, but they get into political games and they play games. I don't like Trump's rhetoric. I don't like him publicly humiliating Jerome Powell. I don't think that's the right tactic to take with him. I think that he'd have a lot better success in reaching out and trying to discuss things openly and maybe praise him for things that he's done well rather than just humiliate him. I don't think you're going to get the best results by doing that publicly. So my opinion is hopefully he can tone it down and hopefully we can get some more common sense compromise to help us all along. We're all Americans. We all want the best for our country, the best for our families. We're all doing what we can. And I believe that the America First policy is going to help us all out. I think we'll give Trump and his administration a chance rather than looking at all the negative spin from the media, largely the left-leaning media. I think we can open up and see that there are a lot of positives here that can be found. So until next time, holler at us if you have any questions. Love to talk to you and chat with you further about this stuff. And we'll talk to you again next time. Take care out there.